You know, when you break your arm, the medical x-ray shows a really jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, there's the fracture.
Right, it is very binary.
Yeah, it is clean, it is visible,
Yeah.
but step into the realm of spiritual health and it is like that x-ray machine is just broken.
Oh, totally.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, incredibly murky. I mean, it can be agonizing to figure out what is actually going on beneath the surface of a person's faith.
Yeah, it really can be.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the source material of a classic text to figure out how to read that murky landscape.
And our mission for this session is highly specific.
It really is. We are examining Chapter 2 of John Owen's 1684 treatise, The Glory of Christ.
Right, specifically focusing on his analysis of the recovery of spiritual decays.
And, you know, how a believer can obtain fresh springs of grace. I mean, if you have been a Christian for a while, you know the feeling of losing that initial spark.
Oh yeah, everyone hits that point.
You might feel spiritually dry or burned out or just distant from God. And you look at your own heart and wonder if the numbness is just a phase or like if it is a sign of something terminal.
Well, to set the proper baseline for our analysis, we have to look at who John Owen was and when he wrote this.
Right. Context is huge here.
It is. He penned the glory of Christ at the very end of his life. He was a 17th century Puritan theologian, a former vice-chancellor of Oxford University, and a man who had experienced staggering personal and political losses.
Yeah, he had been through a lot.
He survived the English Civil War, saw the persecution of nonconformist believers, and, this is intense, he buried all 11 of his children.
Wait, all 11?
All 11. So when he writes about spiritual decay, he is writing as a man whose physical body is failing, whose world is crumbling, and who is basically staring death in the face.
Wow. So he is definitely not offering some superficial 5-step quick fix for a bad week.
Not at all. He provides a rigorous anatomical breakdown of spiritual life, how it decays, and the renewing efficacy of faith. Our goal today is to equip you with his timeless framework.
And what stands out immediately in the text, at least to me, is that Owen operates on a premise that challenges a lot of modern assumptions.
How so?
Well, he argues that saving faith is designed by God to grow continually until the end of life.
Right.
He makes a comparison in the text, likening grace to rivers. As a river gets closer to the ocean where it is heading, it actually increases its waters and speeds its streams.
The current gets stronger.
Yeah, the current gets stronger. The imagery is highly intentional there.
It is. True grace accelerates as it nears the ocean of glory, which is the immediate presence of God.
So it does not naturally taper off into a stagnant puddle.
Spot on. The theological baseline here is that grace is a living, active principle implanted in the soul by the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so if a river slows down and stops flowing,
It means it has been cut off from its source. Or it was only a temporary floodway created by a passing storm.
oh, that is a striking image.
Owen bluntly states that if a person's faith does not flow more freely and fully in its near approaches to glory, it is not saving grace.
Hold on. Owen sets a standard here that if your faith isn't accelerating at the end of your life, it was never real to begin with.
That is what he is saying.
I mean, that is a terrifying standard. Doesn't that risk crushing the listener who is just struggling to get out of bed in the morning?
It sounds harsh at first, yes.
Like, what if you feel like your river has completely dried up?
That is the tension Owen addresses, and it requires a really careful distinction between the internal habit of grace and the outward exercise of it.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the habit, or the root, of true grace always possesses a divine inclination toward God. But the outward exercise of it can be severely hindered
Hindered by what?
by spiritual sickness, temptation, or sheer physical exhaustion. Owen brings in Psalm 92 to clarify this standard. The psalmist compares the righteous to the palm tree and the cedar in Lebanon.
Let's look at those specific trees. Why those two?
Well, a cedar of Lebanon is known for its incredibly dense wood, its deep taproots, and its ability to withstand brutal winter storms on a mountain.
So it represents constant, steady, indestructible growth.
Yes. And the palm tree, on the other hand, grows in arid environments, finding hidden water sources beneath the desert sand.
Right, right.
It represents verdure, beauty, and fruitfulness in hostile conditions. These trees do not just survive. They expand and yield fruit despite the climate around them.
But there is a massive condition attached to that thriving, right? The text from Psalm 92 says they must be planted in the house of the Lord.
That is the key phrase.
Being planted means being fixed and rooted. And Owen defines the house of the Lord practically as the grace communicated through the ordinances of divine worship.
We probably need to translate that for a modern audience.
Yeah, let's do that. He is talking about the objective means of grace, right? Like the faithful preaching of the word, the administration of the sacraments, and collective prayer.
Yes, the gathering of the saints under the instituted practices of the church. If you bypass those ordinary means, you bypass the soil God provided for the cedar and the palm.
This makes me think of a potted plant sitting on a back porch versus a massive tree planted right beside a rushing river.
That is a great comparison.
You could have a potted plant that gets all the sunshine in the world. You water it every day. It looks fantastic for a season.
But eventually,
Eventually, it becomes root-bound. It's constrained by the limits of that tiny pot. And no matter how much external sunshine it gets, it begins to dry out and die.
because the roots have nowhere to go.
Spot on. If you aren't plugged into the right soil, which Owen identifies as the ordinances of worship, you dry out. You cannot sustain spiritual vitality in isolation.
And, outward participation in religious events might make a person look like a thriving plant for a short time.
Sure, they show up on Sundays.
Right. Hypocrites can bear some green leaves,
Right.
but they do not grow like the cedar or bear fruit like the palm because they are not genuinely rooted in love and faith.
They're in a pot, not in the ground.
Yes, and this distinction brings us to an incredibly encouraging concept Owen introduces for older believers. He calls it the latter spring.
The spring and autumn, I think this is one of the most comforting ideas in the entire text.
It is a brilliant observation of the Christian life. Owen points out that the fruit of an older believer looks fundamentally different from the fruit of a new convert.
God, acting as the good husbandman, looks for this distinct latter spring, right? Especially if a believer has gone through a long summer's drought of spiritual decays.
Yes, so for anyone listening who feels older, tired, or past their prime, hear this. You do not have to manufacture the warm, natural affections of your youth.
I talk to so many people who feel guilt because they do not cry during hymns anymore.
Or they lack the boundless, energetic zeal they had when they first believed at age 20. They think their faith is dying because it doesn't look like it used to.
Owen completely dismantles that guilt, doesn't he?
He really does. He explains that the early stages of faith are often carried in a stream of warm, natural affections. Your emotions are heightened.
The novelty of grace produces a very visible, energetic fruit.
But the fruit proper for the latter spring is quieter, denser, and far more substantial.
Like the cedar wood.
Yes, it includes heavenly-mindedness, a deliberate weaning from the world, a settled humility, and a readiness for the cross and death.
Those are the specific fruits that evidence a living principle of grace in old age.
It shifts the expectation from replicating the emotional highs of the past to embracing the mature seasoned fruit of the present.
A mature cedar does not look like a bright green sapling, and it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't.
But this leads us into a difficult reality. We have temporary faith versus abiding faith. If true faith always possesses this underlying divine nature to grow, why do we see people start out incredibly strong, looking like they have a massive river of grace, and then they completely fade away into nothing?
Owen uses a highly descriptive metaphor from the Gospel of John to explain this phenomenon.
Oh, the pond metaphor.
Yeah. Temporary faith is like a pool or a pond created by a heavy rainstorm. It might be very large. It might look impressive.
But it has no underground spring feeding it.
Spot on. When the sun comes out and the dry season hits, it eventually evaporates and dries up entirely.
It was just surface water.
Yes. True faith, however, is an indeficient spring. Jesus calls it a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Even if a drought comes, the source is eternal, so it never fails completely.
And he contrasts the two using the imagery of light from Proverbs 4.
Yes, Proverbs 4.18. The path of the just is like the shining morning light. It goes on by degrees, shining more and more until high noon.
Now, morning light can be temporarily obscured by thick clouds.
Right.
You might have days where a storm rolls in and it looks dark, but the fundamental nature of the sun is to progress toward noon.
The hypocrite's path, conversely, is like the evening light.
That is such a good comparison.
At first, the sunset gleams might actually look more glorious and colorful than the morning light. The temporary believer often looks more spectacular at the beginning.
But that evening light inevitably fades into midnight darkness.
So true faith is meant to grow like the morning light, accelerating toward the ocean of glory, bearing the mature fruit of the latter spring.
But if that is the design, we have to address the reality of the clouds. Believers still experience major, painful periods of spiritual decay.
Owen insists it is a universal vulnerability. No Christian is immune to it.
Which is why the text moves into diagnosing the disease of spiritual decay itself. We have to know what we are looking for.
Owen breaks down two specific categories of decay that infect a believer.
What is the first one?
The first is a gradual and universal loss of vigor. This happens slowly over time.
It is the result of formality and duties, right? Becoming overly entangled in the affairs of this life, or relying on human wisdom rather than divine revelation.
Yes, it is a slow, silent leak in the soul.
Gradual decay makes sense. It is the classic scenario of the frog in the boiling water. The temperature goes up 1 degree at a time, and you do not notice until you are boiling.
That is a very accurate way to put it.
But that does not explain the spectacular moral failures we see. Does Owen account for the sudden explosions?
He does. The second category is a sudden surprisal into sin through the violent strength of temptation.
Like who?
Owen points to David in Psalm 38 as the prime biblical example. David was not slowly drifting. He was hit by a massive sudden moral failure regarding Bathsheba and Uriah.
Oh, yeah, that was a sudden fall.
And that sudden fall brought agonizing distress, broken bones spiritually speaking, and a heavy, crushing sense of divine displeasure.
The text provides a crucial diagnostic tool right here to help us distinguish between temporary faith and true faith when a fall occurs.
Yes, this is key.
When a person with temporary pond-like faith experiences decay, they are apathetic. They justify it. They quote Proverbs 6.9 saying, "A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep."
They do not mind the darkness.
But when true believers decay, whether gradually or suddenly, they are in agony. They are restless, miserable, and vexed until they recover.
This raises a vital question for self-examination. Are you comfortable in your spiritual decline? Do you tolerate the distance from God?
That is the real test.
Owen points to the Church of Laodicea in Revelation 3 as a terrifying example of what he terms stupid security.
Stupid security, that is quite the phrase.
The Laodiceans thought they were rich, increased in goods, and had need of nothing. They were completely apathetic to their own spiritual condition.
But Christ revealed the reality. They were wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked.
That stupid security is the anesthetic administered right before spiritual death.
But Owen does not just leave us with broad, abstract categories. He gets highly specific.
He provides a symptom checklist for gradual decay, allowing the believer to perform a self-examination.
Let's go through those. Symptom number 1, loss of spiritual appetite.
Based on 1 Peter 2.23, believers are commanded to desire the pure milk of the Word like newborn infants.
A healthy spiritual appetite means you have an earnest desire and a savory relish for the food of your soul.
You actually want to hear the Word. You digest it. You look forward to it.
Owen makes a piercing observation about human aging here, and the psychological realism is astounding.
It really is.
When elderly people lose their natural physical appetite, when their taste buds start failing and their digestive system slows down, they rarely blame their own bodies.
Right, they blame the food.
Yes. They say the meals used to be cooked better back in the day. They complain that the recipes have changed or the ingredients are lower quality.
It is a flawless parallel. Spiritually, believers do the exact same thing. They lose their hunger for the objective Word of God.
The Bible feels dry. Sermons feel tedious.
And instead of recognizing that their own spiritual taste buds are dying, they immediately blame the external supply.
They blame the pastor.
They say the preaching used to be much better, or the worship style is wrong, or the church leadership is failing.
The change is actually in their own sick, failing appetite. They are full of the world, and as the proverb says, a full soul loathes even a honeycomb.
That is intensely convicting. You think the church changed, but the reality is your own spiritual palate died. You projected your internal decay onto your external surroundings.
Okay, so symptom number 2 on Owen's checklist. Religion is no longer the principal business of your life.
Owen calls out individuals who are continually plotting in the affairs of the world.
What does that look like?
Their minds, their financial contrivances, their primary intellectual energies are poured completely into their earthly concerns. They only divert to religion occasionally, as if stepping out of their main path for a brief, mandatory detour.
If grace is active and healthy, it subordinates all earthly things to the ends of religion.
Let's contextualize that. In our modern setting, this is the person whose mind is utterly consumed by their investment portfolio, their career advancement, the endless scrolling of political news, or the obsessive curation of their lifestyle.
They give God the exhausted leftover scraps of their attention on a Sunday morning and then immediately snap back into their true passion by Sunday afternoon,
God is a hobby, not the central gravitational pull of their life.
which naturally produces the third symptom, and perhaps the most deceptive one, weariness in duties.
Notice the phrasing there. It is not necessarily the skipping of religious duties, but being weary and lifeless while performing them.
Right. A person can perform a multitude of outward religious acts. They might lead a small group, attend public worship, read a daily devotional, and check all the boxes of Christian culture.
But they can be totally devoid of spiritual intention or active faith while doing them.
The outward performance without the internal exercise of grace is, in Owen's stark phrasing, a dead carcass.
You are presenting a corpse to God. You speak the words of prayer, but your mind is 1,000 miles away. You sing the hymn, but your affections are completely flat.
It is bodily exercise that profits nothing. You can be physically exhausted by church activities while your soul is quietly suffocating from a total lack of actual communion with God.
Now, once a believer identifies these symptoms, once they realize their appetite is gone, their mind is worldly, and their duties are dead carcasses, their immediate, panicked instinct is to try and fix it.
That is human nature. We want to regain control. We want to cure ourselves.
Yes, and here is where Owen waves a massive red flag. He gives a stern warning against using the wrong medicine.
Because applying a false cure to spiritual decay is not just unhelpful, it accelerates the disease.
He offers an incredibly vivid agricultural warning regarding the folly of changing soil.
I find this to be one of the most brilliant insights in the book.
It is so practical.
Owen says that when an old tree is decaying, a wise gardener will dig around it, prune it, and add manure. You tend to the roots right where they are planted.
But if you take an old decaying tree, uproot it entirely, and try to plant it in new soil across the yard, it will simply die. The shock to the root system kills whatever life was left.
The application of this metaphor is highly relevant. Believers often feel dead inside. They feel the painful symptoms of decay.
So they blame their church. They blame their denomination. They decide they need a fresh start.
Owen mentions people in his own day turning to the Papists or the Quakers.
They change their theological soil thinking the new environment, the new style of worship, or the new community will automatically save them and bring back their vitality.
But the fault was in themselves all along. The sickness was in their own sap. Moving did not cure the disease. It only accelerated their spiritual withering by shocking a system that was already incredibly weak.
You cannot outrun a disease that lives inside your own appetite.
Now, to be clear, there are times when a church has abandoned the gospel and a believer must leave poisoned soil.
Oh, absolutely.
But Owen is specifically addressing the believer who moves because of their own internal boredom and decay, looking for an external thrill to mask an internal rot.
Changing soil is a disastrous false cure. Another false cure, Owen outlines, involves what he terms unbiblical mortifications.
Inventing new, heavy rules to earn back God's favor.
Yes. When we feel the acute guilt of our own decay, our natural legalistic inclination is to invent harsh ways to atone for it ourselves.
Owen specifically critiques the historical Roman Catholic practices of his era, things like pilgrimages, strict canonical hours of prayer, or physical penance.
He points out that human beings love to create a heavy yoke of their own making.
And the theological point here goes far beyond any one specific historical denomination. It addresses a universal human flaw.
When Protestants feel guilty, we do the exact same thing.
We invent our own modern pilgrimages. We decide we are going to wake up at 4 a.m. every day to read 10 chapters of Leviticus, take freezing cold showers, and delete all our social media.
We create these intense, punishing regimes, thinking that if we suffer enough under our own rules, God will be impressed by our discipline and heal us.
And that leads directly into the core theological trap, self-reliance and secret merit.
Let me pose a scenario that naturally arises here.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's say I read this checklist. I realize my soul is decaying. I decide I am going to read my Bible more, pray an hour a day, and give a massive sum of money to a local charity to fix my spiritual sickness.
Those are biblical things. Aren't those good actions?
They are commanded duties, absolutely. But Owen dissects the hidden, toxic motive of acting in our own strength.
Right, the motive is the issue.
When we perform even biblical duties relying strictly on our natural abilities and our own willpower to cure our decay, we inevitably create what he calls a secret reserve of some kind of merit.
We think we are buying our way back into health. We are paying off the debt of our own backsliding.
Yes, we leave Jesus Christ completely out of the equation. We think, I was negligent, I caused this decay, so now I will fast and pray and fix it myself.
We act as if we are our own sovereign lords who can heal our own souls.
Owen warns that doing this is laboring in the fire.
Laboring in the fire. You work, you sweat, you burn up all your energy, but everything you produce is instantly turned to ash because it is not connected to the true source of life.
You are just exhausted and still sick.
So we strip away the false cures. We cannot just uproot and change churches to fix our boredom.
We cannot invent new ascetic rules to punish ourselves.
And we cannot white-knuckle our way back to health through sheer willpower and self-reliance. That leaves a believer feeling stripped entirely bare and helpless. What is the actual biblical prescription for this disease?
Owen outlines the true path to recovery by rooting his framework intensely in the Old Testament book of Hosea, specifically chapter 14.
He establishes that the recovery of any backslider is always a sovereign act of divine grace, but it operates through a highly specific, prescribed mechanism.
And there is a theological nuance here from the text that captures the Reformed understanding of grace, the paradox of the promises.
This is a vital distinction to grasp if you want to understand how God interacts with believers.
The promises of the New Covenant regarding the first communication of grace, meaning initial salvation, justification, and being brought from spiritual death to life, are absolutely free and unconditional.
God gives a dead heart life. A corpse cannot meet a condition before it is resurrected.
But the promises regarding our ongoing life are structured differently.
Yes, the promises regarding the growth, recovery, and degrees of grace require duty and watchful diligence on our part.
God says in Hosea that he will heal our backslidings, but he also commands us to return, to speak, to actively repent.
I want to point out to you, the listener, how beautifully this balances the scriptural equation. God's sovereign grace initiates and supplies all the healing.
Without his Spirit, we can do absolutely nothing.
But he categorically refuses to surprise us with this healing grace while we are content to sleep in our spiritual sloth.
We have to wake up and participate in the method he prescribed. He gives us the grace to act, but we are the ones who must act.
And the method Hosea 14 lays out starts with a command. Take with you words and turn to the Lord.
It sounds so simple. Take with you words, but what words are we supposed to bring?
The prophet unpacks a twofold request that must be made in fervent, agonizing prayer. First, take away all iniquity.
You must seek full pardon for the root cause of the disease. You cannot leave one single idol unconfessed.
You cannot harbor a pet sin and expect healing. The soul has to be utterly sincere in its desire to be cleansed.
Second, receive us graciously. This is a plea for the relational assurance of acceptance.
After we have brought divine displeasure on ourselves through our worldly wandering, we need God to speak peace to our conscience.
We need to know we are freely accepted again in the Beloved.
It is an affectionate, broken-hearted confession, and it includes a renewed covenant. Hosea records the people saying, Asher shall not save us, we will not ride upon horses, neither will we say any more to the work of our hands, ye are our gods.
That is the total renunciation of fleshly confidence. Asher represents worldly alliances and human strength.
They are casting away the false cures. They are abandoning their self-reliance, their financial security blankets, and their religious pride.
And when a believer does that, when they bring those honest words and completely renounce their self-reliance, God responds with a breathtaking promise.
He says, I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him.
And the resulting effect of that divine healing is abundant fruitfulness. The text in Hosea says the believer will grow as the lily, cast forth roots like the cedars of Lebanon, and their branches shall spread.
This brings us full circle to the latter spring we discussed at the beginning. It is a massive revival of spiritual life, rooted deeply and spreading widely.
But all of these duties, the prayers, the confessions, the forsaking of idols, they are all leading to one singular focusing mechanism.
We have reached the absolute climax of Owen's treatise. Everything we have discussed so far is preparation for this.
This is how the grace actually makes its way into the believer's sick soul.
Everything hinges on this reality. Jesus Christ is the sole fountain of all supplies of grace.
We can no more bring forth spiritual fruit on our own than a branch separated from the vine can grow grapes. Christ is our life efficiently, and he lives in us effectively by his Spirit.
And the only way to receive this grace from the fountain is by faith. Faith is the open pipe. Faith is the conduit.
Yes, and Owen defines what this faith looks like in active practice. This is the core concept, the central thesis of the entire book, a steady view of the glory of Christ.
It is a constant, lively exercise of faith on the person, the grace, and the office of Jesus Christ.
The text points to Psalm 34.5. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. Notice the simplicity. They just looked.
It is an act of total trust arising from a clear apprehension of who he is and what he has done.
It is not an academic exercise. It is the gaze of a desperate soul on a perfect Savior.
I keep thinking about this biological mechanism, photosynthesis.
Oh, that is a fantastic way to look at it.
A plant does not strive, strain, sweat, or panic to make its leaves green. It does not manufacture its own cellular growth through sheer force of will.
What does it do?
It simply positions its leaves to absorb the sun. It fixes itself in the light. A believer absorbs spiritual life and repairs their internal decay by fixing their mental and spiritual gaze entirely on the glory of Christ.
That analogy captures the essence of Owen's point accurately. You cannot manufacture grace, but you can position your soul to receive it.
And Owen meticulously details how this specific practice, this steady view of Christ's glory, cures spiritual decay through 4 distinct effects on the human soul.
Let's walk through those 4 effects, because this is where the theology becomes intensely practical.
The first effect of looking at Christ is conformity, or what Owen calls the assimilating efficacy.
Looking at Christ changes us into the likeness of Christ. Owen compares this mystery to the Old Testament story of Naaman the Syrian washing in the Jordan River to cure his leprosy.
Naaman was a proud commander. He expected a spectacular, difficult cure.
He wanted the prophet to wave his hand, call down fire, or demand a massive payment. When he was told to simply go wash in the muddy water of the Jordan, he was highly offended.
Flesh and blood look at the Jordan River and say, how can dirty water cure a systemic disease?
In the same way, flesh and blood look at the gospel command to behold the glory of Christ and say, how can just looking at an invisible Christ fix my broken marriage, or cure my apathy, or stop my addiction?
It confounds human logic. We want a complex checklist because a checklist strokes our ego.
But how does this assimilating efficacy actually work? What is the mechanism behind it?
The mechanism is rooted in human nature. Human beings are inherently worshiping creatures. We psychologically and morally become what we obsess over.
If you fill your vision with the infinite grace, patience, purity, and majesty of Christ, the Holy Spirit uses that vision to alter your actual moral composition.
As Paul says in 2 Corinthians, we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being changed into the same image from glory to glory.
The second effect of this steady view is fixing the soul.
Spiritual decay happens because we allow 1,000 vain imaginations and worldly anxieties to crowd into our minds.
We are perpetually distracted by screens, political outrage, financial fears, and trivial pursuits. Our minds are fractured.
But looking steadily at Christ fills the mind and forcefully casts out these intruders. It is a matter of bandwidth.
You cannot hold a steady, adoring view of his infinite glory while simultaneously entertaining petty worldly lusts or panicking about your retirement account.
The superior pleasure of his glory starves the lesser idols of their oxygen.
Which leads directly to the third effect, stirring up graces. Owen states that Christ is the proper adequate object of all grace.
Break that down for us. What does it mean that he is the proper object of all grace?
It means that every single grace the Holy Spirit implants in you, love, zeal, humility, patience, joy, was designed specifically to respond to Jesus Christ.
When your mind is fixed on him and his glory, every grace is put into a state of maximum readiness.
They are stirred up to their due exercise simply by being in proximity to him.
I see. So you do not have to force yourself to be humble. You do not have to stand in front of a mirror and say, I am going to be humble today.
That just produces pride.
Instead, you look at the majesty and condescension of Christ on the cross, and seeing his majesty produces humility naturally. You gaze at the object that draws the grace out of you.
Spot on. And finally, the fourth effect of this steady view is vigilance against sin.
A constant view of Christ naturally excites the soul to maintain a vigilant watch and a constant conflict against the deceitful workings of sin.
When you see his beauty, you are highly motivated to protect your communion with him.
You realize what you stand to lose if you yield to temptation.
Everything in him has a constraining force that encourages our souls in the daily battle against the flesh. The steady view provides the motivation to fight.
So let's summarize the progression we have walked through today for you, the listener.
We started with the expectation of the latter spring, the wonderful reality that true faith accelerates and bears distinct, mature, steady fruit in old age.
We diagnosed the painful symptoms of spiritual decay, the loss of appetite for the word, where we blame the food, sidelining religion for worldly business, and feeling utterly weary while performing dead religious duties.
We then rejected the false, self-reliant cures. We saw the danger of changing our soil to escape our own deadness.
And the trap of trying to earn our way back into God's favor through our own unbiblical rules and secret merit.
And finally, we arrived at the true remedy, seeking sovereign grace through an affectionate confession, renouncing our self-reliance.
And maintaining a steady, faith-filled view of the glory of Christ, acting like a plant absorbing the sun to receive the life it cannot create itself.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on that concept of the steady view.
Owen asserts that viewing Christ casts out vain imaginations and fixes the soul by crowding out lesser things.
Consider the media, the thoughts, the anxieties, and the daily preoccupations that currently fill your mental landscape.
If a plant adopts the characteristics of the soil it is rooted in, what is your daily mental diet conforming you to?
Are you staring at the muddy puddles of this world's outrage and anxiety? If so, you will become anxious and outraged.
Is your current gaze starving your spiritual appetite? Or is it fixed on the glory of Christ, preparing you for the fruitful and vibrant latter spring?
That is a diagnostic question we all need to take seriously.
Thank you for joining this session of The Deep Dive. We invite you to take these insights into your daily walk. And the next time you feel that spiritual sickness setting in, remember, you do not need to invent your own medicine. You just need to look to the source.